A political storm erupted this week as ABC abruptly suspended late-night host Jimmy Kimmel, igniting fierce debate across the entertainment industry, political circles, and legal communities. The decision followed a wave of criticism over Kimmel's commentary in the wake of conservative activist Charlie Kirk's assassination, and President Donald Trump wasted no time claiming the move as a personal victory. The clash has now widened into a broader confrontation about political pressure, free speech, and corporate vulnerability in an era when cultural battles often intertwine with government influence. Standing on British soil during his state visit, President Trump appeared jubilant when news of ABC's decision broke. He immediately turned to his platform Truth Social to frame the suspension as a win for the nation. Trump wrote, "Great news for America. The ratings challenge Jimmy Kimmel show is cancelled. Congratulations to ABC for finally having the courage to do what had to be done. Kimmel has zero talent and worse ratings than even Colbert, if that's possible. That leaves Jimmy and Seth, two total losers on fake news NBC. Their ratings are also horrible. Do it, NBC." The president's tone underscored his long-running disdain for late-night comedians, many of whom have built their reputations mocking his presidency. By labelling the decision a patriotic triumph, Trump sought to draw a broader symbolic meaning out of what was, in reality, a corporate programming call influenced by outside pressure. The uproar stemmed from remarks Kimmel delivered in his monologue earlier in the week, shortly after the killing of conservative figure Charlie Kirk. Addressing the political fallout, Kimmel told his audience, "We had some new lows over the weekend with the MAGA gang desperately trying to characterize this kid who murdered Charlie Kirk as anything other than one of them and doing everything they can to score political points from and in between." The finger-pointing there was grieving. On Friday, the White House flew the flags at half-staff, which got some criticism. But on a human level, you can see how hard the president is taking this, but condolences on the loss of your friend Charlie Kirk. Master, personally, how are you holding up over the last day and a half, sir? I think very good. And by the way, right there, you see all the trucks. They just started construction of the new ballroom for the White House, which is something they've been trying to get, as you know, for about 150 years. And it's going to be a beauty, yes. He's at the fourth stage of grief: construction, demolition, construction. The attempt at satire, merging Trump's personal grief with a jab at White House renovations, sparked fury among conservatives who saw it as tasteless mockery in the aftermath of a political ally's death. Adding to the backlash was a statement Kimmel had posted earlier, one that struck a more somber tone. Instead of the angry finger pointing, "Can we just for one day agree that it is horrible and monstrous to shoot another human? On behalf of my family, love to the Kirks and to all the children, parents and innocents who fall victim to senseless gun violence." This attempt at balance, blending condemnation of violence with biting humour at Trump's expense, left the host vulnerable to charges of insensitivity from critics, and it provided an opening for those long seeking his removal. What turned the controversy from a cultural spat into a constitutional question was the intervention of Federal Communications Commission Chairman Brendan Carr. Hours before ABC's announcement, Carr suggested Kimmel should face consequences. Carr said, "When you look at the conduct that has taken place by Jimmy Kimmel, it appears to be some of the sickest conduct possible. As you've indicated, there are avenues here for the FCC. So there are some ways in which I need to be a little bit careful because it could be called ultimately to be a judge on some of these claims that come up. So there's calls for Kimmel to be fired. I think, you could certainly see a path forward for suspension over this. And again, the FCC is going to have remedies that we could look at, like what Jimmy Kimmel said or not, find it tasteful or distasteful. That is the FCC chair saying there in the wake of that there are remedies that the FCC could look at. His words blurred the line between government oversight and direct pressure on a private broadcaster. While the FCC does regulate over-the-air stations, commentators noted that for a top federal regulator to weigh in publicly on the fate of an individual entertainer raised serious questions about coercion and free expression. For observers, Trump's glee over Kimmel's suspension was not surprising. His hostility toward late-night comedians is well documented. He has frequently derided hosts like Stephen Colbert, Jimmy Fallon, and Seth Meyers as untalented and politically biased. In fact, weeks before ABC's decision, Trump predicted that Kimmel would be the next to fall. After CBS cancelled Stephen Colbert's show in July, the president declared, "Colbert has no talent. I mean, I could take anybody here. I could go outside to the beautiful streets and pick up a couple of people that do just as well or better. They get higher ratings than he did. He's got no talent. Fallon has no talent. Kimmel has no talent. They're next. They're going to be going. I hear they're going to be going. This long-running vendetta framed Kimmel's suspension not as a sudden reaction to one offensive joke, but as part of a larger campaign by Trump to undermine critical voices in media and entertainment. As news spread that ABC had abruptly suspended production of Kimmel's show, the entertainment industry was stunned. Just hours before, fans had been lining up outside the West Hollywood studio where the program tapes, unaware that the night's episode had been cancelled. Veteran media analyst Brian Stelter captured the disbelief sweeping Hollywood. He noted that Kimmel's contract with ABC was due to expire later this year, raising uncertainty about whether the suspension was temporary or a permanent cancellation. Stelter explained, some fans were already lined up, ready to head inside the studio in West Hollywood. So Kimmel's voice is going to be really important. That's the next big part of this story. What will he say and when? Kimmel's contract with ABC was coming due in just a few months. I believe it was set to expire at the end of this year. So this could be the end of the show forever, right? Maybe the show will not come back, or maybe ABC is going to react to the very loud criticism that the company is facing right now. The abruptness of the decision left many within the comedy community rattled. For decades, late-night television has served as a cultural forum where politics, entertainment, and satire collide. The suspension of one of its most prominent figures raised alarms that political influence could now directly shape who is allowed to speak. Stelter emphasized the chilling effect. Right now, the entertainment industry is in absolute shock. This feels like a worst-case scenario for many entertainers, comedians, political activists, figures who want to have free speech rights in this country and feel that they are under threat right now. The decision also sparked intense debate among legal scholars. Senior CNN legal analyst Eli Honig underscored that the central issue was not simply ABC's choice, but the government pressure leading up to it. Honig explained, so the key decision maker here is ABC itself. Now, given the pressure tactics that have been put out there by the FCC commissioner, we just saw that clip by the president at times. ABC really had two options. Option one, which they took, would be to suspend Jimmy Kimmel. They're a private entity. A BC, they cannot be sued under the First Amendment. The First Amendment only applies to governmental entities. Congress shall make no law. So ABC could have chosen option A, suspend Jimmy Kimmel, save yourself the money, the political hassle, whatever it is, good or bad. That's ABC's decision. But Honig argued there was another path. Option B, which I think is really more important, which ABC chose not to take, is they could have taken a stand. They could have said, we're not going to give in to the pressure. And then if and when the FCC took action, ABC could have challenged that in court. And I am quite confident that they would have won on First Amendment grounds, because now we're talking about governmental action. Now we're talking about the FCC, which is part of the executive branch. Honig drew parallels to the legal concept of jawboning, where government officials informally pressure private companies to silence speech. Courts have increasingly warned against such coercion, he said, and Carr's comments appeared to cross that line. If you look at the statements by the FCC commissioner, that's pretty straightforward. That's pretty coercive. I mean, that's basically on the borderline of a threat, and I think had ABC stood up, I think they would have won in court. This framing positioned the suspension not only as a media industry story, but as a potential First Amendment test case, one in which a major broadcaster chose to sidestep legal battle by complying. The political sensitivities surrounding Disney, ABC's parent company, added another layer of complexity. Disney CEO Bob Iger, a seasoned executive once rumored to consider a Democratic presidential bid, faced the challenge of protecting the company's broad business interests from theme parks to streaming platforms in an era of heightened political hostility. Stelter argued that Disney likely calculated the risk of a showdown with the Trump administration against its broader corporate priorities. Disney is a big company. It doesn't just have broadcast stations. It also has theme parks that everybody loves. It also has lots of other lines of business. So the company does have to take the government's threats seriously. We are in a whole new world when it comes to this administration being willing and able to exert its pressure against private corporations, a world that these executives, CEOs, frankly, do not want to live in. The pressure did not just come from Washington. Broadcast heavyweights Nexstar and Sinclair, both companies with regulatory matters pending before the FCC, reportedly played a decisive role in accelerating the fallout. According to reports, executives at both firms called ABC on the afternoon of the suspension, declaring that they would no longer air Kimmel's program on their local stations. Hours later, ABC took the show off the air nationwide. The backdrop was significant. Nexstar had just agreed to a $6.2 billion deal to acquire Tegna, a merger requiring FCC approval. With billions at stake, critics argue the company had every incentive to align with Trump-appointed regulators. Stelter described the situation bluntly. So what do we know tonight? We know that both Nexstar and Sinclair called up ABC this afternoon, complained about Kimmel and said they were yanking the show off their stations. ABC subsequently yanked the show nationwide, so we know that two major TV station owners, both of which need to curry favor with the Trump administration, were the ones that most loudly and vocally condemned Kimmel and said they were going to not air the show tonight in the coming nights. It's an Occam's razor situation. It's exactly what it looks like. This intersection of business interests, government regulation, and political agendas transformed a late-night suspension into a case study of how modern cultural battles are fought. For now, the spotlight turns to Kimmel himself, who has yet to issue a detailed response. His silence is notable, as his next words may determine whether he frames this as a fight for free speech or as a personal crossroads in his career. With his contract nearing expiration, speculation abounds about whether he will return to the air at all. Meanwhile, free speech advocates and critics of the Trump administration warn of broader consequences. If comedians and entertainers believe political pressure can cost them their platforms, the chilling effect could ripple far beyond late-night television. The battle lines are now clearly drawn. On one side, a president celebrating what he calls a cultural victory. On the other, an industry reeling from the realization that its freedoms may not be as secure as once believed. The suspension of Jimmy Kimmel's show may have begun as fallout from a single monologue, but it has quickly escalated into something much larger. It is a story about presidential power, regulatory pressure, corporate vulnerability, and the precarious state of free expression in America. Trump's declaration, great news for America, underscores how the decision fits neatly into his long-running crusade against media critics. For his supporters, it is proof that cultural institutions once seen as untouchable can be brought to heel. For his detractors, it is a chilling sign of how political power can be wielded against dissenting voices. As the entertainment world waits for Jimmy Kimmel's response, the episode has already made history. It is no longer just about one comedian, but about the future of satire, dissent, and the fragile line between government influence and private decision-making in American media.